understood before, if it just said Lacey, that wasn't cutting it, that wasn't working, because Lacey could mean anything. Yeah. But I think we can solve this by putting Lacey Wah, and then we never have to explain where we're at any longer. Mm-hmm. This is everything looks great, but I think we can accomplish getting rid of the city of by identifying.
Well, there's also Lacey's in other states, so that it would also solve that.
And that happens all the time
Lacey, New Jersey,
as well.
There's other Lacey's.
And so it would just be really nice to identify us as Lacey Wah.
And that was going to be my point, is how does Vancouver differentiate from Vancouver, Canada? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So anyway,
Can we take a look at it like that?
Yeah, we can make some alternative designs. Yeah, absolutely.
because I think you could just move it over and get the Y in there, and it still fits right there in that logo. I hate it. Sorry. Sorry.
No, sounds
I've been thinking about this for a while.
I was going to bring it up, and I didn't think anyone else would be on board
Well,
with it.
no,
but I had the same
as a business
exact
guy,
thought.
this is why I'm doing this stuff all the time too. So you have to like identify where you're at.
And if
as
you
well.
say you're from Washington, they're like, oh, DC? Okay.
Yeah. Well, this will say
you don't have
WA.
DC.
That's what I'm saying.
So
This
it'll be
is-
perfect.
That's why I say, that's why I like Lacey Wah, because it both fit. Like,
Yeah.
oh, Washington.
Yes.
Ah, I see.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you.
But I really like.
It looks great.
I like
Looks
the-
great. I didn't want to I felt really bad bringing it
The colors
up.
are way
but-
better. Getting rid of those stripes, huge improvement.
Yeah.
I like the hawk on there. I really like what you did.
But it's still identifiable as, it's not too far of a jump.
Yeah.
Yep.
No.
It's perfect.
Yeah,
That was the goal, yeah.
Yeah, my other thing was I really love the colors of the police logo, but I like that this isn't like just this huge dramatic shift into
Yeah.
this, different world. So
I mean,
It's amazing too what the border does just to
the
make it
borders,
pop.
the border really does a
Yeah.
good job.
Well, I mean, I don't know if the blue hawk makes much sense. I like that it represents Hawk's Prairie and all this, things to go with that. But maybe brown, or I don't know.
Does it matter sometimes when you get, because it's a 3-color process no matter
Yeah.
what, right?
That's the deal.
Yeah, typically you want to limit logos to 3 colors or less. In this case, we've got, 5?
Yeah. So how does this look in the 3-color process? What would you do? All blue, right?
Yeah, we did go through that, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's hard to differentiate the mountain from the sky, from the hawk, from the trees with less colors.
Yeah.
So,
Well, because that makes it a more expensive logo if you can't just do a 3-color process.
that's true, yeah.
Water's new logo, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I like the hawk, but it would be nice if you could just do a 3-color logo too.
Yeah.
We try to keep the blue in there too, somehow.
Yeah.
That's because I think there were 5 colors there, right?
And I think, too, one of the things that Ty and the team has done as part of this process is to create this logo, but also have alternatives, which he'll talk about for different types of uses as well. And so there are a few examples of what that could look like with, say, 2 colors, for not 3 necessarily. So we'll take a look at some of those as well.
Yeah, so along those lines, with this logo, as I mentioned, the previous logo doesn't lend itself to all usage very easily. Mm. And so when you create a primary logo, you also want to create alternatives so you can use the logo in other situations. Mm. And in this case, we've got the main logo, which is the one on the right, but we also have a horizontal version that says City of Lacey, which has the little symbol there too. There's also a round version of the logo, which is really just a round version of that. So if there's a situation where you need to put a round symbol on something, then you've got that round one available, to use very sparingly.
Only when you have to.
That's right.
You want to use the primary logo as much as
That's
possible.
right, yeah.
You
And
don't
that's,
see the swoosh in any other format, right? It's the swoosh, that's it.
that's right. So in talking about the branding guide, and as Shannon was alluding to, so, the decision on the logo is really driving our branding guide decisions, because we want the colors to all be the same, which dictates more things down the lane here. So with our branding guide, there's lots of organizations that have branding guides. Every company out there's got a branding guide. Different cities have branding guides. State departments have branding guides. And branding guides all have a color palette that's set that they use. They've got different fonts that they use that are kind of their designated fonts, guidance on how to do graphics and imagery, and of course the logo too. All of those things will be present in our branding guide as well. And the reason why you do all this is for consistency. I mean, we really want the same look and feel no matter who you're talking to with the city or what document you're receiving in the mail from the city. That kind of thing. And at the same time, branding guides also provide an easy path for employees to produce documents, and they're not fumbling around trying to find something and recreating this and changing that and all sorts of things for their own uses. So accompanying a branding guide is also a style guide, which has to do with the these are some elements of branding guides: the typography, the icons, color palettes. Accessibility is a big part of branding guides as well. Video standards is something that we have in our branding guide too. But as I was saying, accompanying that is a style guide, which is a little bit on our writing. And so you've got a guide that helps to frame the culture of the organization, the personality, and how we write documents. And the style guide will go over things like how to properly communicate government terminology, how to plain talk things so anybody can understand them, how to properly cite laws and codes, times and dollar amounts, and provide guidance for like when to use the land acknowledgement, things like that we don't always have. So once the branding guide and style guide are done, then it's, again, up to us to overhaul the look and feel of our website and the TV channel and presentations and other things. And then we can create templates for a number of different documents and things that we do. So where we are in the process right now, well, we're right around step 5 or so. We're continuing to draft a few lingering things, and we'll be going around with this guide to different parts of the city departments to talk to them, make sure it works well for everybody that's going to be using it within the city. And then will be a revision process in that too. So that's just an update on the branding guide. Any other questions?
Good.
On slide number 19,
Yes.
might choose a different example to put under typography.
Oh, my thing's not
or
working
it
out.
looks strange for a presentation. Rainbow vomit specifically.
Yeah. That's the kind of thing that
I
we
don't know who
we
went
watch
with
out
those
for.
examples, but it was.
Thank you, and we'll make sure that in the next presentation isn't there.
It was a little distracting, that's it.
Okay, thank you, good job.
No problem.
Let's go on to our Clean Water Alliance surplus property update.
Okay, are we rocking and rolling? Looks like it. Well, I'm going to change the subjects here from branding to a PowerPoint that doesn't hit the branding, so my apologies. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Vanessa Dolby, Community Economic Development Director here at the City of Lacey. Coming back this evening to continue the conversation about potential land acquisition and partnership with Lot Clean Water Alliance. and then an additional future opportunity for affordable housing development on that property. We had this conversation in the joint meeting with the school district. October 22nd, I believe, was the date of the joint meeting, and talked about this property. But just for reminder's sake, the parcel is located along Mullen Road. It's at 5025 Mullen Road Southeast, just across the street from Camacha Middle School. This property is a little bit over 5 acres. It's currently undeveloped, and it is a forested site. It's been identified as surplus property by lot, and it has a lot of benefits in terms of its location. It's along a bus line. It is near the schools. It's near other amenities such as shopping as well. It's currently zoned open space institutional, which is our typical zoning for any publicly owned property. Some of the other benefits of the property is it currently has a developed frontage that includes sidewalks, curbs, utility infrastructure. It is a fairly long frontage along Mullen Road, which allows for vehicular ingress, egress at a couple of points to ensure that there's smooth mobility for vehicles, bicycles, pedestrians throughout the site if it's developed.
Does it have curb cuts already for the?
It does not.
No.
That would be a part of the construction, but there's enough length there
Sure.
to be able to have appropriate spacing. So that's just by way of reminder and background of the piece of property that we're talking about, some of the assets associated with that property. Since that last conversation in October, on the 22nd of October, the city has continued their due diligence in terms of looking at the property. And so coming back today, kind of to follow up on some of that due diligence and talk about next steps in terms of possible purchase and sale of this property. So again, we had a memorandum of understanding with Lot. In that MOU, it gave the city the opportunity to go through the due diligence process. We had an initial gopher study completed on the 22nd meeting. We have we've completed that study and now have determined that the site does not have pocket gophers on the property, which was a huge hurdle in order to determine that it's a developable piece of property. So that allowed us to move forwards to the next steps, which is to start to have the conversation about a purchase and sales agreement with Lot. So what could be in this purchase and sales agreement? What could this look like? A couple of contingencies would need to be included in this document if we were going to move forwards with the purchase of the property. So first, we would need to ensure that the development on the site is an affordable housing project that meets the state's definition of affordable housing pursuant to state law. Second, the final approval of property acquisition would be the council's authorization. So that contingency would need to be within there. And then third, we would also need to look at amending the Lacey Municipal Code in order to update our rules to allow for property surplus pursuant to the new state law that allows for affordable housing development with public property. So those are the three primary contingencies that we are looking at including in a purchase and sales agreement. Before I move on to the rest of my presentation, which is talking about the next steps potentially with the Housing Authority, I wanted to pause here and see if there was any conversation or questions up to this point.
Pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward. We've already been updated on this part.
Okay, we can always come back to it. So a unique separate step, which is running parallel but not at all the same thing, so trying to separate these out in the presentation, is our next steps with the potential partnership with the Thurston County Housing Authority. So looking at their needs, one of the things we will need to start looking at next would be a memorandum of understanding or an MOU with the Housing Authority. So that MOU with a goal of completing that by the end of this year. And the reason for that goal or that target is there's $4.5 million that's been allocated for funding for a project, and in order to ensure that they can maintain those dollars, they need some sort of agreement in order to say, hey, yes, we have a viable project moving forwards. So that's the reason for that timeline there. But what would that MOU include? So there's a number of things that we would want to consider in this MOU. So first on the left, you can see kind of what is the city looking at. So first, one, agreed in a negotiated purchase and sales agreement. Which is kind of how we had the MOU with Lot, right? We said, here, let's give us some time, do some due diligence, and then we'll work on the purchase and sales agreement. Similar concept here. We would do that with the housing authority within this MOU. Of course, we would have to follow through with purchasing the lot in order to even begin this conversation. Second would be to amend our zoning or our development standards to allow for a cottage development. And those amendments would look at providing something that's similar to the adjacent standards of any zoning around that property. And then third is the same contingency that we have with the lot, which is we would need to update our rules and regulations to allow the city to surplus property under the affordable housing provisions of the state law. Now, what would the housing authority need to agree to? One, they would need to agree to develop the property with affordable housing pursuant to that state law. So that's the first thing in the cottage development format. And then second, to determine a sale price for the property. So we would need to work that piece out. And then I'm going to move to the next couple slides, but these are more talking about maybe what the future process might look like after an MOU was completed. So it's kind of now the third step. Yes?
One thing before you go on to determine sale price of the property. And that doesn't, I mean, and you and I talked a little about this, that could be $1, right? So that
Yes.
we're, obviously we're buying this for the purpose of affordable housing, not looking down, okay.
That's right. That new state law allows for cities to make a decision as to whether they can sell the property for $1, they can sell the property up to our purchase price.
Great.
Ready? Okay. So what would the process look like moving forward? So as I talked about in the last meeting, we're envision this site as a cottage development. So these would be little single-family cottages similar to the size of our accessory dwelling units, pre-approved plans that we have here at the city, around 800 square feet, give or take. The Housing Authority has indicated that they plan to have 36 senior housing units. These would most likely be single-story, just due to accessibility needs on the property. And just to put it in context a little bit, affordable housing, I put our Thurston County AMI big graphic up here, but don't try to squint your eyes too much to read the numbers. A senior citizen living on Social Security on a fixed income, if they were a one-person household, would be making, on average, this is a 2024 numbers from the Social Security Administration, around $1,800 a month, so $22,000 a year. That would put them in this basket as extremely low income. So these are the folks that they're looking at trying to house, is the senior citizens on a fixed income, potentially just Social Security income alone. And then expanding that project on the site to add an additional 24 multi-generational units. So these units, the terminology multi-generational is really just talking about expanding from a senior community to having youth or family or single adults, and partnering or hopefully partnering with the school district to provide housing for employees within the district or students that actually go to Camacho Middle School that would fit within the income brackets. These units could potentially be up to 80% of the AMI, which if you look up here for a 4-person household is around $90,000 a year. These income numbers do go up to over $100,000. So if you have a larger household, it potentially could have an income over $100,000 and still qualify to be in one of these units and meet the state law. And then in terms of public engagement, so working through let's see, I think we're at like the 4th step in the process. We'd be coordinating in theory with the Housing Authority before they come in for a development permit, which would be a formal permit process. We'd go out to the community, have a community conversation, hear what their thoughts are about the project. Once we have more of a design in place, that design would be provided through the Housing Authority. The city would not develop that design originally. They would put together their studies, their site plans. We'd go out and have a conversation, get some feedback, have more details around what this actually looks like, and then use that to inform further refinement before formal application comes into the city. Once that, yeah.
How's the senior to non-senior ratio established?
Sorry, could you ask me again?
The senior ratio?
Oh, you mean in the community, the 36 units to the 24 units?
Yeah, how is that established?
So I would have to ask Craig specifically how they came up with 36, but they had funding for a 36-unit project in Tumwater, and so they're shifting that funding to this site, and it would have the same deliverable requirements, is my understanding.
Oh.
And the additional units are because of the site capacity, it's a larger parcel, so they can get additional units on it.
Yeah.
So because they were committed to that in another project.
Yeah, that's where the 36 number comes from, yeah, so they want to fulfill that need, and that's what the
For seniors,
funding is
yeah.
tied to that they already have, is my understanding.
I think the community meeting is a critical piece on this, because
Yeah.
when we've all seen the emails that we've
Yeah.
been getting, but I think a lot of that email traffic that we're getting is based on the fact that of just not understanding what the project is. Because I think once it's explained, I think it takes away a lot of the things that people are afraid of.
Yeah.
Because this is really is not gonna do the things that people are afraid of in this project.
And I think the sooner we get accurate information out there, the
Yeah.
less misinformation gets, because it was all over the place.
Yeah, because it's a lot of misinformation out there, for sure.
And if we get to that phase, absolutely committed to having that community conversation. Yeah, absolutely. So then again, just, that's not the end of the public engagement opportunities, though. Once they come through community and economic development, there is the formal engagement process as a part of that, which would include a public hearing as well. So there's the formal community engagement piece and then the informal part that we can do before that project becomes real in terms of permits.
I think it's just important to say, though, that if anybody is listening and watching this, that we do hear the public comment, and we are definitely going to do our job in making sure that people know accurate information and everyone is understanding of that.
And I just want to add on a little bit too, so for council awareness, Vanessa and Ty have been working on a response to get information back out to those that have emailed in, so that they have that information of where they is in the step in the process and moving forward.
Yeah. And I would just say too, part of this is because you guys have done such an amazing job of getting this done so quickly. And I think that's why people are, seems to them like it's moving very fast. And I think that's just maybe a lesson learned for next time if we have a project that moves forward this fast, so.
Yeah. Is there a time when they need to obligate those dollars? So what's the time clock here for the housing authority?
For the housing, well, what they've communicated to us is by the end of the year that they need that MOU signed in order to maintain those dollars.
Quick.
So quick.
So right around the corner.
Okay.
So in sequence, we will finalize in the negotiation and the purchase sale agreement with Lot Wastewater Alliance and get that moving. Of course, actual purchase of the property would not occur until, for council approval down the road. And then we'll turn around and construct the MOU with the housing authority and bring that back to council.
Okay.
And we can do
In
that
December.
before the purchase is completed and all that, right?
Yeah, we'll set the purchase sale agreement, then the MOU would have all the contingency in it that, if we do actually purchase the property,
Right.
then we'll enter into a purchase sale agreement with
Now,
housing authority.
as a part of that,
Or another partner if they drop off.
as part of that MOU is a commitment from the city to change the zoning there, and do you expect this to be a change in how open institutional, or are we gonna actually change the zoning?
The good conversation. Just one thing I want to add, it is a commitment to consider looking at it, because ultimately this decision will be the council's
Sure.
decision, and it will have to go through its own separate and unique process in terms of public engagement, planning commission involvement, as well as your involvement on that. So there's two paths, as you noted. There could be the rezone path, which is actually just zoning it the same zone as surrounding properties, or looking at adding some text amendments to our development standards that would allow for cottage development within that particular zone. Or a third option I haven't thought of.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, any questions? I say go forward.
Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you, Vanessa.
Then our last agenda item is our designated reserve discussion. Told you this was going to be a long
Troy's
meeting.
insulted.
I'm trying not to feel abandoned, but,
Why are you so far away?
and I feel like I'm on an island too, so. All right, good evening, council. We are here to talk about our annual reserve designations. This is a requirement by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. This is Statement 54 that we're working on. This is, an opportunity for the council to really communicate its priorities. and it helps us inform the budget in terms of what we include in the budget for your proposal and your consideration. It also helps us indicate how we will report your reserves on financial statements. So it's a pretty important step. This particular standard has 5 different designations for reserves. We're really going to focus on 2 of those designations tonight, but I do want to go through all 5. The first is non-spendable. These are really non-cash items. Receivables, inventories, so they're not in the form that we could actually spend it. The next category is restricted. These are fund balances that are constrained by some external legal source. Think state constitution, RCWs. Think about revenues that are restricted for a particular purpose. So those are automatically designated because of those restrictions. Committed is the next. This is what we're really going to focus our conversation on tonight. These are balances that are constrained by the highest level of decision-making in our organization, which is you, the City Council. Another category is assigned. This is just below committed, and we have historically delegated the authority to designate fund reserves as assigned by the city manager and finance director. I think this has worked really well. We've been able to remain flexible in terms of those designations. That way we don't have to keep coming back to council anytime funds become available. It allows the city manager and finance director to act, quickly on those actions and still communicate the council's intent. And then the final category is unassigned. This is basically everything else. These are funds that don't have any sort of designation or identified purpose. A good example of these reserves are the 2-month operating reserves. So we do have a council policy that requires that we have operating reserves equal to 2 months of expenditures in each one of our funds.
We could easily assign that, though, too, right?
We get pretty close to 0.
Yeah.
When we take a look at our reserves. It's really our intent to communicate what our priorities are. So we do try to get down to that 0 level. I do want to go through all of the cash balances. I will note that these cash balances are as of year-end 2023. We are, of course, still in 2024. Cash is moving basically every single day. So these are the last known cash balances that aren't moving. So again, year-end 2023. You can see we had pretty healthy reserves, really dictated some of our decisions in terms of how we were going to fund projects, most specifically the police station. Kind of giving you a preview in terms of what's happening in 2024. We're going to be spending down reserves. Again, the police station. We have identified about $37 million of reserves for that project. We're already spending those as we speak. In terms of looking at the revenues and expenditures as they're occurring so far in 2024, we're spending about $4 million more in our general fund than we did last year, primarily related to labor. We've talked about that during the quarterly reports. So again, about $4 million more spent through October. About $3.5 million of that is due to labor increases. On the revenue side, we're about $1 million higher than we were in 2023. That's primarily internal service funds or internal service charges. Think engineering design, construction management. We have a high level of construction going on here in the city. So we have engineers, we have project managers that we're paying for. So those are really offsetting when you think about it. That's also in that cost of labor increase as well. I do want to go through what's happening in terms of transfers within all of our funds. I just really kind of want to illustrate why I think reserves are going to go down, or why I know reserves are going down, actually. So I've added a couple columns here. We have significant transfers that have already occurred in 2024. Those transfers occurred on June 30th of this year, and giving just an illustration of where cash may be if all things occur as budgeted. These are transfers just limited to the police station. So you could see that about $19.1 million of general fund revenues are going towards the police station project. Just under 11 million of real estate excise tax is being transferred from the arterial street fund, which is also a special revenue fund going to the police station. And of course, you see the full 30 million going into the building fund or a capital project fund for the police station. So we know that we're going to spend down general fund revenue reserves. I do want to touch on each one of our funds. We have 29 funds that have been authorized by the City Council for 2024. I'm not going to go through all the details, but I do want to make sure the council is aware of the cash balances at the end of 2023 for all of our funds. These are the 6 funds that make up your general fund. Most notably, the current expense fund. This is the fund, of course, that provides the services I think our citizens most identify with. This is also where the majority of the general fund reserves are coming from to fund the police station project. So about $17.5 million has already been transferred out of this fund into the building fund. We also transferred $1.6 million of reserves from the criminal justice fund into the building fund. So that makes up your $19.1 million of general fund reserves being transferred out. I do want to show the utility funds. There are 11 funds that make up your 4 utilities. These are reserves that must go to that function, so these aren't available for general services. They must go to the utilities in which we collect the revenues for. I do want to highlight the high level of reserves that we do have in the capital funds for water, sewer, and stormwater. But I also want to note we have an extremely high capital improvement program that's within your comp plans. You're seeing about $31 million in water. In 2025 alone, we have a proposed budget of almost $28 million of construction for water. Wastewater, we have almost $15 million in reserves. We actually have a proposed budget for you of 18.3 in construction next year. We budget on the high side for capital. We don't often construct everything, but that is what consists of your budget for next year. Do want to talk about the special revenue funds. These are largely restricted funds, but do want to highlight the arterial street fund in terms of the monies that we have going towards the police station. So far, we've again transferred about $11 million. We have about another $7 million that is budgeted for next year in terms of transfers from REIT or the arterial street fund. So a total of $18 million.
When we started this process, this fund was at 38, right?
Let me go back side. It's actually higher than that. It was 48.
Yeah, 40, yeah.
When we were first looking at this, was it 48?
It was 48.
Yeah.
Okay, for some reason I thought it was 38.
Well, if you're talking about like 2022.
I am.
Right.
Yeah, it was probably in that range,
Yeah.
38 to 40 million.
Yeah. Just shows you how much we put in from REIT. It's going into this fund. That's why it went up.
Right, we had, large, high level of property sales that happened during the pandemic years in 2020 to 23. I think one year we brought in $6 million in real estate excise tax, but we've been in that 4 to 6 million range
That was
for about a 5-year period.
Industrial property sale that occurred that was very
Yeah.
high.
Here are the capital project funds. Here you can see the building improvement fund. This is where we are paying for the construction of the police station. So you see the $30 million coming into that fund. Parks and open space, we have about $1 million there. We've talked about these 2 debt funds in the past, general obligation bonds. That's really where we bring in property tax dollars, we transfer in dollars there to make our debt payments. But we've talked specifically about the local improvement district debt fund. We have $4 million sitting here. Really, these funds could go to any general government purpose, anything that has a benefit to the community. So, as the council has conversations and maybe at a future retreat, you could talk about this $4 million to give us, direction. I would not recommend moving the money out of this fund until you actually identify projects that we're actually going to spend money on, so.
How much debt do we actually have and that's left in this fund?
We don't have any debt.
Wow,
left in this
so we're
fund.
paid off the debt?
So.
And so this is how much money we've made off of the LID?
Right, so we have paid off debt early, as an example,
Huh?
in terms of LID payments. A lot of this comes from early payments due to property transactions. I can't remember the LID number, it might be 19, so it was
Yeah.
what built Main Street and
Yep.
a lot of that transportation infrastructure. So typically what happens with an LID when the property closes, the lender wants clear title, and we hold a spot on that title. So it's often required that when a property changes hands, that these LIDs are paid off. So that allowed us to pay off that debt early, therefore we had interest savings throughout that period.
And are we investing this LID debt money too? And then that's why this is going up as well?
That's correct. So it's a part of our, what I'll call the investment pool, so we are investing.
So how much do you think we've made off of interest on this fund?
We're probably in a 3.5% range right now, so, 150,000 a year, give or take.
That explains how we got to the 4 million.
So anyway, future discussion, I think, for the council. It's a good issue to have. Here are the final two funds for the city. These are internal service funds, so these are related to vehicles and equipment in our equipment rental fund and information management systems. These are computers and networks. So these are how we fund those equipment. That's how we take care of it, maintain it, how we provide service. The bulk of these reserves are earmarked for equipment replacement, so these aren't readily available for any other purpose. So any questions on our reserves before we go into what our proposed committed reserves are for the council? Okay.
Seeing none?
So starting with current expense, I'll kind of navigate you through these one at a time, but I'm really going to focus on the changes that we have proposed. So to give you an idea what the color coding is, red, any of these reserves that are highlighted in red, these are reserves that we have spent down in 2024 or we plan to spend down in 2024. So those are going to be lower than what the council committed last year. Anything in green is new reserves. These are funds that we are proposing the council consider to commit for 2024. So for budget policy, right now we have a $3 million committed reserve, but we plan on spending down $433,000. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's how we balance the budget. So certainly until we know, we want to make sure that we have that holding spot. But so we took the $3 million, subtracted out that $433,000 to balance our budget. But we have adequate reserve to replenish that $433,000. So the city manager and finance director have assigned those funds, and we're going to ask council to commit that. So we begin 2025 with the full $3 million. Of course, I'll remind council that we are expecting to balance the 25 budget using about 1.75 of this reserve. Strategic economic development investments, a very similar scenario as the budget policy implementation reserve. We have budgeted to spend $375,000 of this reserve in 2024. We do have adequate reserve to replenish that for 24. So the council will have its full $3.5 million available going forward.
2.5.
Looking at human and social service reserves, rapid response team, we started the year 2024 with a $500,000 reserve. We're going to spend down about $239,000 of this reserve. We did identify another $500,000 for this purpose. We see this as a more long-term service that we're going to have to continue. So that's going to give us about three years worth of funding for that rapid response team. Human Human and social services initiatives and investments, $700,000. This is really to cover the purchase that you talked to previously this evening. Looking at public safety reserves, both of these are new reserves, all slated to be used in 2025. So we have a commitment for body-worn cameras and fleet cameras of about $500,000. This will pay for those. It's basically a pay-as-you-go purchase. This will get us through that term, which is, I believe, about halfway through 2027.
Question for you, Troy. Going back to human social services initiatives and investments. So you have 700,000 there. That's for the purchase of the property we talked about earlier, which we know we're gonna actually spend less on, right?
Possibly, yeah.
Hopefully.
Possibly. We anticipate we're gonna spend less than that on it. That money, that difference is, where does that go?
We can repurpose it to other human and social services initiatives. We've also talked about reducing the reliance on the budget
Okay.
policy.
That's what I was thinking.
We would come back to council with a recommendation and maybe two different options.
Great.
And then the 261, it shows is committed, is that because those are now the dollars that we're receiving from the tax, the 20 bips?
No, this was a $500,000 reserve that we had identified for the rapid response team. It's lower than the $500,000 because we're going to use some of that in 2024. So I've already subtracted that use out. So this is the net of the $500,000 we started with.
Okay.
Just so I remember, was that to add more rapid response team members or just to fund the rapid response?
That's the fun.
Just to fund it, because it's been funded out of reserves for the last couple of years and want to continue that service.
Talked about the body-worn and fleet cameras, the vehicle replacement reserve that we're proposing of about 100. Really the shortfall. I think we've all, we just haven't been able to keep up. So again, both these reserves are slated for use in '25.
So real quick on the body and fleet cameras, it seems like the number just stays there. And so are we are we rebuying cameras like all the time or something, or?
Well, the number does fluctuate. So as an example, we added 4 new police officer positions from the public safety sales tax. We had to buy 4 cameras for those officers. We also added 4 police vehicles under that sales tax for that.
That's 8.
So that, yeah, there's 8 cameras.
Did you say they released first?
Yeah, but that fund originally was $1 million, was it $1 million? Or what was it, when it started off?
Oh, boy.
I mean, it was a bigger number.
About a year's worth more, and we're
Yeah.
about 200,000 a year. So I can't remember the exact number, but we were in that 700,000.
It was bigger than that,
range.
yeah, 750.
Yeah, we've been
or
spending it.
something.
That's why you have such an odd number there, because we've been buying that down. So. Looking at parks, culture, and recreation, largely unchanged from, what we proposed last year. But I do want to point out the 471,000 there at the bottom. These are projects that are all in the 2025 budget. This is going to help fund 3 different projects. Actually, they're more like repair and replacement projects. We have about $740,000 of much-needed repairs for the Woodland Creek Bridge, Woodland Creek Park Bridge, Longs Pond dock replacement, and the demolition of the house at Long Lake. So again, this is going to help fund about $740,000 there. These are largely new committed reserves that we're proposing. $3 million for the Joint Animal Services new facility. We kind of had that discussion during the legislative discussion, but we're estimating that Lacey's share of that will be about $5 million, depending on what that initial design shows. But we do have $3 million of the $5 million identified if the council so chooses. We think we've heard that is a priority of the council, so that's what we're proposing for you. We have, actually, this is an existing reserve that committed, or the capital facilities plan implementation. We had $3 million last year. We're adding 80,000 to that. A couple minor projects in year 2025 proposed budget. We have some City Hall counter improvements of about 30,000. We have 50,000 for additional small conference rooms at the library, so 80,000 there. A new reserve, completely new reserve, is the police station decommissioning. We're proposing $1 million for that. We don't really have a plan, if that's what you're going to ask. This is really a holding spot. We know we're going to have to do something, so we wanted to at least identify funds so we are prepared when the police department does move, that we're at least have some seed money in terms of what that may look like. It may look like, demolition if we can't find an affordable way to repurpose that. It may be just mothballing the building for the time being. So we really have a few different paths, and that's just going to have to come back before this body to have that discussion before we get to that point. But we're
going to have, and in the 2025 budget, proposed budget, is money to hire a consultant to take a look at City Hall and look at how we better use an efficiency of the space, and that process may also inform us on what we can do with the existing police station. But if we are able to move forward with that work and work of City Hall, we may need that space to also to have temporary locations to move people around. But it's going to be a longer-term process to really identify what the best use for that former police department location, or if we need to look at something completely different.
When I first saw the number, I thought there must be some plan.
No. We just know we're going to have to do something, so we want to start building that reserve now to start anticipating that work.
How long has we've had the City Hall reserve? And seems like it's been sitting around for a long time.
It has been. It used to be $1 million. That's really a reserve that we just keep in place for significant repairs. I think the money that we did spend went to, that's what I recall. So that's just really for, like I said, repairs and potentially insurance deductibles, that type of thing.
I mean, you can say police station decommission, you could add that to the City Hall reserve, and it'd be the same thing. It's sort of semantics.
Could be, yeah. Looking at some other miscellaneous reserves, we have a workspace and remote work upgrade that started as a $250,000 reserve this year. We spent about $39,000. We expanded into the third floor, so we bought furniture, we bought that type of equipment, a little bit of expansion and change of workspace, in the city manager's area as well. So we just keep that in place for those, just to be flexible so we could really adapt to the changing workplace. We have $269,000 for capital replacement. We're going to actually use the majority of that, again, for vehicle replacements. Just outside of the police department, we just are falling behind on those replacement costs.
When you have that number up there, is that like deductible and cost, or is it just like cost?
No, that's just shortfalls. So this started in 2024 as a $500,000 reserve. We're going to spend about $231,000 this year for vehicle replacements. Going to spend another $160,000 or so in 2025. So it's meeting its purpose.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, do we include all of our costs of replacement in there?
No,
I see what you're
saying.
Yeah.
No, a lot of that comes out of that equipment rental fund. I had that slide earlier. It's about $17 million in reserves. We collect replacement dollars each year for all of our vehicles. We've just been falling behind in inflation. So we try.
Just the offset of the difference in what cars are costing, vehicles are costing more than planned for, that's what this is.
That's right. And we actually have a 5% built-in inflation for vehicle replacement, and that hasn't been keeping up. So
The last couple of years.
that's where these have come in handy,
Okay.
We do have a couple of different reserves related to energy conservation, climate action. We have identified an additional $500,000 for your consideration to be committed for this year. We've been budgeting about $200,000 per year for these initiatives, and this is really to continue that program until we could find sustainable funding for that program. Looking at some of our other funds within the general fund, community buildings, not a lot of change, although we are proposing to add about $297,000. This really gives us a total of $450,000 for this reserve. We do have about $230,000 in the proposed budget of expenditures from this fund. Most notably is the roof replacement at the Jacob Smith House. We have some flooring improvements at the community center. I think carpet replacement at the senior center. So again, we're going to spend part of this down in 2025. Looking at your street fund, no change here really. What's highlighted there in red for transportation equipment improvements. Again, it's vehicles that is the issue here. We have a street sweeper, I think, that we're woefully behind in terms of replacement dollars, so we're going to have to find one-time reserves for that. I do want to point out in terms of economic development, the College Street and 7th Avenue roundabout throughout. We have two different reserves, a total of $1.3 million in reserves for that project. I think the very early estimate on that project is $5 million. So we've got part of the funding for that.
That one's on the tip, right?
I'm sorry?
That one's on the tip. That's the.
We have it on the
It
tip,
is.
yes. I know that we need, that sort of hit a stalemate as we're still need to work out some things with MJR and St. Martin's University. Where are we at in that process?
Well, I think the stalemate, I'll know more after December 7th. We did some modified designs and went back to the table that MGR is favorable of, and now I've had presented those with the Abbey, and I'm waiting to hear back from them after December 7th of if they're ready to move forward. But it's positive movement.
Okay. We've been talking about this for a bit, so.
Yep.
Looking at the capital equipment fund, again, not a lot of change here, but we did identify another $850,000 for your consideration. We're going to spend most of that in 2025, about $725,000 in just various aging equipment replacement. Also want to make the proposal to round up the rack synthetic field replacement to $700,000, so add $5,000 to that, just to make that an even number. In terms of total rack field replacement throughout our various funds, if the council does authorizes $5,000, we'll have $2.2 million in total reserves for field replacement. That will basically cover another full replacement of every synthetic field at the rack. Looking at your arterial street fund, of course, this is where the real estate excise tax funds are for the police station, as well as reserves for future transportation projects. So a lot of moving parts here. We're going to, in terms of that first reserve you're seeing there, that $7.1 million, that is the final REIT dollars going to the police station that will be transferred in 2025. You have some spending down of reserves for just the normal transportation projects, both in 24 and 25. Once all the pieces fall into place at the end of 2025, we expect there will be $18 million in reserves for future transportation improvement plan projects. That, of course, assumes we spend every dollar in arterial streets, which, again, typically doesn't happen. But on paper, we expect to have $18 million at the end of 2025.
So we're in pretty good shape there, considering what we're pulling out and what we're expect to have at the end of this. I mean, there was this worry that we were raiding this fund and we're not going to have anything left in the fund. But, you know, after all said and done, we're not that far off from where we were.
We're not. I think there's, it's worth noting and celebrating even. But, we do have a large transportation improvement program in front of us.
Yeah.
But, This is also a testament to our staff that does an incredible job in securing grants. We're constantly looking for those opportunities, and, just the timing of projects as well. But, we are going to use, roughly half of future real estate excise tax for the debt payment on the bonds at the police station. So we do need to be cautious, and, I know we always have been, but, yeah, we're in good shape to start, but, the next 20 years, we'll have to watch this carefully as we pay down that debt.
And just to reiterate, just the money going in the future is going to be a lot slower growth in that reserve account.
Sure.
So,
Maybe.
For your building improvement fund, not a lot of change being proposed, but I do want to note that we do have adequate funds to, again, fund the $1 per capita for the art plan. So you see that there in the 2024 line there, $60,210. I do believe we're going to have a public art discussion sometime in January. We do have a placeholder on your agenda tracker, so more conversation on public art to come. We are proposing that we add about $4,400 to the what we're calling the 5700 Pacific / New Museum Fund, just to round up to $50,000. Just for the council's reminder, that $45,635, that's really a leftover fund from when we bought the property to begin with. We had $1 million reserve there for the purchase of that property. We did the demolition, we did some minor improvements there, so really this is what was left of that $1 million. So again, just to round up to $50,000.
So that brings the total for the property to?
There's a $500,000 reserve, so $550,000 in total. In terms of your RAC, Regional Athletic Complex Capital Fund, we have, not a lot of change there, but we did identify another $1.75 million for the council to commit. I will point out that we're using $1.5 million of that reserve for the design of the RAC Phase 3 as well as the environmental assessment, so that is in your proposed budget. Point out that the $1 million reserve above that is a 5-year plan to subsidize RAC operations of $200,000 per year, so that is also accounted for in long-term planning. I do want to talk about other community priorities, really to make sure that staff's on the same page as council. Also, this really communicates to the city manager and finance director as if funds become available where we should concentrate first. So we talked about the City Hall renovation project, about $5 million. We have $3 million identified, so we still have some unfunded monies there. College Street and 7th Avenue Roundabout, again, a $5 million project. We have identified $1.3 million of that project. We talked again about the Joint Animal Services building. We just using a rough estimate of $5 million being Lacey's share. We have $3 million of that identified. We obviously have a community priority for the RAC Phase 3. That's roughly a $14 million project, at least according to what we could fund through debt if we extend the Public Facility District sales tax, which we have all intents to do that. So we are, like I said, entering the next phase of design for that project, which will really get us to our scoping and what's possible for that project. So really just a holding place at this point. We talked about the future or the vacant police station. Again, we don't have a plan, but we do have $1 million set aside for that. The mayor already talked about the 5700 property and future museum. The current estimate for the new museum is about $13 million.
Actually, it's $15 million according to our legislative priorities.
Stand corrected.
Every year.
We have $550,000 in reserves identified for that. Your Parks Capital Improvement Program, you of course have a work group that is putting together a proposal for you, and you should see that here soon. That's about $57 million of projects in that capital improvement program. Again, your recommendation will be coming to you soon.
No, we created that group, it's not a council. No, there's no council members on that, that's public. Yeah, Ruth is on there.
You've talked a lot about the partnership with the YMCA and the school district. We have $5 million in terms of a potential memorandum of understanding with the school district. We don't have any funds identified for that at this point, but that is something that your parks improvement funding work group is working on as well and considering. You did adopt earlier this year a significant facilities capital improvement plan, about $71.2 million in there for various facilities, most notably the Public Works Ops Center. Again, no funding identified for that. And we've always just kind of want to have a placeholder for permanent supportive housing and really talking about regional partnerships. So we just have a $3 million holding place for that. But again, we've identified that as a critical priority for the council. And a couple other priorities we've heard here recently, one in terms of the Human and Social Services Grant Program. We know that there's not enough money for the asks and the needs out there in the communities, so we've identified that as a top priority. And energy conservation projects, we've heard that time and time again as being a priority for the council. So again, these are the community priorities that we think we've heard you communicate. So as we look at assigned reserves and being flexible, these are the areas we will try to identify funds for first. So unless we're wrong,
$1 million, that's all.
yeah. Unless we're wrong and not on the same page as the council, those are the committed reserves that we hope to bring to you before the end of the year. We do need council's direction on that in order to get that in the 2024 year-end financial statements. So we do plan to bring that slate of committed reserves before you for your consideration at your next council meeting.
That's to the dollar that you know as of right now?
That's correct. And if there are additional funds, we will
Yeah.
use the sign process to identify those.
Yeah. So, when there's additional funds, which there probably will be, this is a conservative, for the councils,
For the newer members.
for the newer members, everywhere you saw a green line, right? When we're saying we're going to now assign that didn't just come from out of nowhere. That is our budget surplus from last year. And so what we said we're going to bring in to what we actually, this $8 million something dollars. That is what we're looking at and trying to assign that budget surplus in this amount. So that's why we're going through this process, because we brought in more dollars than our budget said we did. And so that all goes in the reserves. Now we have to say what we're going to sign those at.
Is this the general time frame every year that we'll go
Yes.
over those? Okay.
Yep.
And it's two things. It's the revenue projections and what we receive in revenues, but also what our expenditure projections are and what we saved in expenditures. Because if you look at employees, you have a turnover, and there's always savings in having around about typically 92% open or fully staffed. This last year in 2024, that number's been up higher, 97%. So our expenditure costs are going to be a little bit higher, but then again, we don't know that until the final reconcile, probably in the first quarter.
Yeah, it's typically
So that's when
March.
we really the numbers start coming in together.
Right, and that's the same reason that even though we're going into a 2025 budget where we have to use $1.7 million.
A structural deficit that really doesn't exist because.
Likely will not come to reality, because we will have unfilled positions, there will hopefully be more revenue than anticipated, but I mean, there's always adjustments, but you have to start somewhere, right? You have to make some assumptions.
Now I understand that this is how, is this also, how other cities that are close to us with larger deficits also? I mean, are they doing the same process or?
No.
are they-
Well,
That's where
they're not as
okay.
conservative in their budgeting as we
Yeah.
are.
So, yeah, I appreciate
Their
that.
their deficits are more real. than
Yeah,
ours.
I mean-
They're truer
But again,
deficits.
too, we have to go with conservative projections, because you never know what future revenues growth is going to look like. And especially this year, we have seen a decline, a trend going on, so we got to be cautious there as well.
Yeah,
But you know, the council and the mayor's right in the discussion, that's part of that process. We don't want to be caught short.
But because we've been done this for a very long time in the city, that's why during the Great Recession and as we move forward, we didn't have any layoffs.
Yeah.
We didn't have to cut services because of this.
well, it's why we have this much money set in cash on hand.
Exactly.
But, you know,
Not everyone has that luxury around us.
I will go back to two things on here. I'm glad that we're finally going to do something with our art reserve, because that's been driving me crazy. That's been sitting there year after year. We put money in every year. We haven't done anything with it in a long time. But the other thing that drives me crazy is that, you know, years ago, I lobbied really hard for us to have an economic development fund. And that, you know, has come in handy a couple times, you know, over the years. But that economic development fund doesn't do anything sitting in our budget not being spent. That is not economic development. That is the promise of a future economic development opportunity that, you're right, I mean, so I know I have this conversation with you quite often. I want to see a plan that we actually take advantage of our economic development fund. That's why we established it. We should be using it to promote economic development in our community.
I think this is why, when we talk about the retreat coming up, what I would really like to know that we didn't necessarily get at the last one is like, what are the things that, you know, you guys really, because I want to know what are important to you guys, 'cause, I didn't quite get that at the last one, but,
Well, I mean, there's a lot of stuff, right? I mean, but I know that this is something that's being worked on, and it's going to come to us, you know, here in January or whatever it is.
Well, also too, I just want to say that fund's been very valuable, because it has been used for various activities, like get towards the
Makerspace.
the makerspace, and some other economic initiatives. But we're looking at replenishing that, so we have that fund. So it looks like nothing been spent if you go year-to-year balances. But also, as the mayor pointed out, about a month ago, the Community Economic Development team, Vanessa and Sarah, were kind of some general ideas that we're going to bring back to council. I think right now it's currently scheduled for the first work session in January to kind of hone in on what are those investment strategies to utilize those funds going into 2025, especially now that we need to look at those financial incentives.
Yeah, great. Any questions?
No.
Thank you. And with that, we've reached the end of our agenda, so without objection, I'll call this meeting adjourned. Keep it classy, Lacey.
Seeing all those funds in one place,